This is Brian, the second grade math buddy that I had the privilege of working with this summer. Brian is very competitive, and he's definitely a go-getter. Brian is also very confident when he gives an answer. He does not usually second guess himself when he is figuring out problems. Um, Brian understood basic math concepts, and he was able to come up with his own problem-solving skill. He often did this in a unique way, a way that I may have not taught him to do that, but he was able to figure that out. Brian met 3 of the 4 learning indicators. He's definitely very strong in the math area. You can tell that he enjoys math, and that was very evident, and I feel like that was just a great driving force for him in these games. Brian follows directions very well, although his competitiveness may come off as a little extreme sometimes. I would just have to remind him it's okay to not win and not be first, and he would come right back down. He was totally fine with it after I reminded him it was okay. The learning indicator is the student able to fluently add basic facts, including combinations of 10. Brian met this learning indicator. Brian is very deliberate in his counting and his way of counting. He would tap his fingers on the table, making a noise, helping him figure out how to count. And that's how he did that, was just tapping his fingers on the table. Brian also used the strategy of making it 10. He would primarily use this if his rolls consisted of an 8 or a 9 or any of those larger numbers. For example, one of his rolls was a 4 and a 9. He right away said 10 plus 4 equals 14, but then I need to minus 1 that I added, so that equals 13, and he knew that was the answer right away. For the learning indicator, is the student able to work with equal groups of objects to communicate an understanding of multiplication? He met this learning indicator. Brian, he was able to correctly draw circles and stars very quickly and could count them and find the right answer quickly. You could tell this was something he enjoyed and he thought it was fun, so he was able to do it fast, and he was confident when he gave those answers because he knew he spent the time figuring them out on his paper. Oftentimes when the number was 2, he would draw 2 circles on his paper, and when he rolled that second dice to get the second number, he would automatically just shout out the answer. For instance, one example was he rolled a 2 and then he rolled a 6 and he automatically just shouted 12 without drawing those stars on his paper. So he was very confident in giving that answer, and he knew those answers when his first number rolled was 3 or anything less than that. For the learning indicator, can the student add and subtract within 20? And does the student know how to find 10 more or 10 less than a number without counting? Brian met both of these learning indicators. He could successfully figure out the answers when he was on a different number, but sometimes he would need scratch paper to figure those answers out. But he was always able to figure them out when using that scratch paper. So I thought that was very great that he took the initiative to ask for the scratch paper to figure it out. He wanted to have the right answer, and this was a way of him to figure that out. Brian was also able to figure out the answer even when the number was other than a multiple of 10. He could do this without scratch paper as long as those numbers and figures were 30 or less. A few recommendations I would have when working with Brian and working on his math concepts would be playing store. And I would limit the money being used to dimes or $10 bills. I would have Brian be the store cashier, and I would purchase items that were maybe $2 and $4. And he would have to figure out that 2 plus 4 equals 6, and then he would have to turn that into a subtraction fact, such as 10 minus 6 equals 4. So I would need $4 and change, and he would be able to count that money back. Another thing that I would suggest working with Brian on is his flashcards and just memorizing those basic facts. Just being repetitious will help him be quick and be accurate in those basic facts, which I feel like would help him. Also, just practice and practice and practice for him. I learned that each individual child has their own way of solving something, maybe in a different aspect of how I would teach it, but he could figure out those problems, and each child is able to do that. I learned by working with two different age students that competitiveness can drive some students and it can also hinder some students as well. I learned that when I am a teacher in math, I will provide time to figure out problems, and I will allow each child that adequate time to kind of self reflect and problem solve on their own, trying to come up with a basic way that works for them to problem solve. I will obviously give my opinion and my help, but I want them to have that basic knowledge of how to problem solve on their own.